on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the day of yet another ambulance strike, Rishi Sunak talks tough in the House of Commons about the government's new laws to make sure we get a minimum level of service. Starmer doesn't agree. We'll debate whether the government have this one right. We'll also talk about Starmer's performance and Rishi's performance in particular today and later on this evening in a party election broadcast. Is he really cutting the mustard with Conservative voters? I'll be joined by some doctors who've grouped together to say they know how to treat COVID-19 and they claim almost 100% success rate. And joining me on Talking Pints, senior Republican, he's a senator from Utah, Mike Lee, and I'll be asking him about what on earth went on Capitol Hill last week. American politics becoming almost as farcical as British politics was in 2022. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you and good evening to you. NHS waiting times and the threat of more strikes dominated the first PMQs of the year today, with the Labour Party claiming the government has gone from clapping the nurses to sacking the nurses. The Prime Minister quizzed the opposition leader on why he wasn't supporting the government's proposed minimum safety legislation, which seeks to ensure a minimum standard of service by key workers during strike action. Sir Keir Starmer responded by saying that if Rishi Sunak had negotiated with NHS workers, they wouldn't be on strike in the first place.
Australia and Canada and the US, they ban strikes on blue light services. We're not doing that. All we're saying is that in these emergency services, patients should be able to rely on a basic level of life-saving care. Why is he against that, Mr. Speaker?
He's not promising that people would get to see a doctor in a few days, like they did under Labour. He's not promising that cancer patients would get urgent treatment, as they did under Labour. He's not even promising an NHS that puts patients first, like it did under Labour. No, he's promising that one day, although we can't say when, their record-high waiting list will stop growing.
In other news, the Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen has had the whip removed after he shared a tweet comparing the COVID vaccine's after effects on cardiac health with the Holocaust. The Chief Whip, Simon Hart, said Mr Bridgen had crossed a line and that misinformation about the vaccine caused harm and cost lives. The Prime Minister has called the comments utterly unacceptable. A 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after the shooting of a woman on Christmas Eve. 26-year-old Elle Edwards was killed at a pub in Wallasey on Merseyside, but was not believed to be the intended target of the attack. A 23-year-old woman has also been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. The Foreign Minister has called for the immediate release of a British-Iranian national due to be executed by Iran. Alireza Akbari, a former senior defence official, was reportedly arrested in 2019 for spying for British intelligence. James Cleverly has called his planned execution a politically motivated act by a barbaric machine that has total disregard for human life. Flights in the United States are beginning to resume after a mass computer outage forced all aircraft to be temporarily grounded. Over 4,000 flights were delayed and more than 600 were cancelled due to the failure. The White House says there's currently no evidence of a cyber attack, but Joe Biden has ordered an investigation. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Farage.
Well, Westminster 2023 is now in full swing. Yes, we've had a Prime Minister's questions today. We've even had a party political broadcast on behalf of the Conservative Party. We'll analyse all of those. But what dominated Prime Minister's questions, perhaps unsurprisingly, on the day of yet another ambulance strike, was the government's approach to this. The legislation that was laid down before the House of Commons by Grant Shapps yesterday. Rishi Sunak defending the government's position, I thought, actually quite robustly. And interestingly, for Rishi Sunak, he was going on the offensive. He was going on the front foot. Keir Starmer did not respond to the question, which was basically other English-speaking countries and European countries have a minimum level of service on blue light services. In fact, some countries ban strikes in those areas completely. Will you or will you not agree? To which Starmer responded by basically saying, look, if you treated the staff better and negotiated before, the strikes would never have happened, but carried on with the theme that the NHS basically isn't working. But I actually think for once, the government are in the right position on this, and I think, if not to begin with, but over the course of the next couple of weeks, I think public opinion will swing behind the government. And the reason I say that is those of us in work are now paying more tax than anyone's known in living memory. Surely, if we dial 999 because somebody has had a heart attack, surely they deserve an ambulance to come to them. And I think that line of logic, if Rishi continues to push it with passion and with vigour, will win round public opinion. That's my view. Please give me your view. Is the government right in its approach to these public sector strikes? Give me your thoughts, Farage at gbnews.uk. Now, joining me down the line is Matt Taylor, a paramedic. Matt, a very good evening to you. Yeah, he is coming. Right, well, we can't wait around all day, can we? We will get Matt back because Matt is a paramedic. I'm joined by Kelvin McKenzie, former editor of The Sun, and somebody who's spoken out quite strongly on these strikes. It is considered a basic human right for people to be able to withdraw their labour. And we understand that. We might not like strikes, but we understand that. And, hey, strikes have been around since pretty much Tudor times. I think we've known them in this country on and off. Do you think that the government is right to try and legislate for a minimum level of service on vital sectors? Or would you go further and say that strikes should not be allowed at all?
That's where I'd go. For something like the ambulance workers, and incredibly, it's astonishing, the 999 call handlers are now on strike, or have been going on strike in 6-hour blocks, actually. They decided very kindly, that's very nice of you, so nice of you, not to do it for 24 hours. So, and then then the management get involved in this and then beg the public, look, unless you are literally going to die or your relatives think you're going to die, please don't call us. Try and get somebody to take you by car. Do you know what I find extraordinary about this? That our country is so inured to the actions of public sector workers to damaging and destroying their lives that they just say, oh, well, that's it. I don't feel like that. I think it's a shocking thing to think, and I say this over and over again, the idea that your dear old mum falls over, shatters her hip, and that you and your relatives or your friends or your neighbours have to work out a way to, because she's not, you know, I think it's category 1 now, she's not in category 2 or category 3, to work out a way that you take her to A&E while she's screaming in pain.
Kelvin, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to go to Matt Taylor, paramedic, who we now do have on the line. Matt, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Can you hear me now?
Matt, the argument that is being put here in the studio by Kelvin Mackenzie, which I rather agree with, is, you know, we are law-abiding taxpayers in this country, and if our elderly mother, you know, falls to the floor and is at risk of losing her life, surely, but surely, she deserves an ambulance to come to her.
She certainly does. So does everybody, not just the gentleman's mum. Let's give some context to the conversation, shall we, and give some backstory for the general public so they can understand why we're in the situation that we're in. During 2021, when we dismissed 40,000 care workers because they didn't necessarily agree with the current mandates that were being pushed on them, we lost 40,000 care workers in care homes and domiciliary care, which means care in the community for looking after your relatives when they get discharged from hospital. Now, if you have hospital beds that are full in hospital and with patients ready for discharge, if there are no carers in the community to look after these patients, they can't be discharged from the wards. If they can't be discharged from the wards, there's no beds for them to be moved to from the A&E department downstairs. As a result of that, no beds in A&E get available or become free. Therefore, the ambulances can't offload the patients, which creates a queue. Therefore, those ambulances get stuck at hospital, can't discharge, can't offload the patients, and can't go back out to pick up more patients. So, as a general rule of thumb, that creates a shortage of ambulances.
Matt, hang on a second. Matt, bear with me. Bear with me. On those 40,000 care workers, I've campaigned on this programme to say it's completely wrong and they should have the option of getting their jobs back. All right, and I really have, very, very strongly. On your general comments about the current failings of the NHS, you know, the 13,000 people in beds that don't need to be there, all of those things, ambulances arriving, A&E not able to take patients. I get all of that. I'm with you. I understand the problem. I believe the NHS is broken and needs a rethink. However, the point that I'm making is surely the government is right to say that we need legislation with ambulances, for example, and nurses and doctors to say that a minimum level of service will be guaranteed. Surely that is the right thing to do, and I would argue even the compassionate thing to do.
It is guaranteed. Everybody that was on strike, was on the picket line, was still available for Cat 1 calls if required, or the people that were on the picket line were off shift. Never has there been an ambulance station completely unmanned so that when calls are coming in, there is no one to respond. And I want to point out the last strike that happened with the ambulance crew was one of the quietest times, one of the quietest days in recent months. So the general public were well aware of what was going on and the demand for calls went down. So it would have been one of the quietest 24-hour periods in a long time. So I get what you're saying, Nigel, I really do. But what I don't appreciate, and lots of other care workers and health professionals don't appreciate, is other people who don't work in care deciding and discussing what it is they think will work in a care environment. Now, I will give an opportunity for any healthcare professional, MP, members of parliament, anyone, to come on an ambulance for 12 hours and work in A&E for 12 hours and then come out with the same opinions of what they had when they went in. And I appreciate that the general public aren't always aware of what's going on, and they're only told things through rose-tinted glasses to trigger or to sway with whatever party narratives they want to push at the time. No one ever really sits and talks to the people that work on the front line, boots on the ground.
So Matt, basically, you want more money, but you're arguing. Just give me a quick answer to this. You're arguing that actually, even though
never said nothing about money.
All right. Well, you know. Strikes across the public sector are generally about money.
Okay, listen. What the problem we have at the moment is the unions, unfortunately, represent us in certain aspects. Now, I don't agree with the unions using the wage increase over the working conditions. Personally, and I know this from most staff, it's the working conditions that are more of an issue than the wage increase. The wage increase will just help with retention to stop people leaving, which would make the situation even worse, which is what we're trying to prevent at the moment. Now, the fact that none of the people wanted to sit down and discuss anything for weeks on end, that's not our problem either. Only 50% of people voted out of all the healthcare professionals. Only 50% of people voted to strike. So another 50% of people either didn't vote or were too scared to vote. Now, I know lots of people are too afraid to really speak up and talk about the situations and things they are seeing frontline. This has been going on for a long time, Nigel, right? But those of us that work in NHS, this is normal. The problem we've got now is the ambulances are being stuck at A&E, so they can't be discharged. There's always been delays for patients, unfortunately. We don't code them, but there are always been delays for patients. Unfortunately, that's not our fault. The systems gets abused. Sometimes the triaging of calls isn't as accurate as it could be. There's a plethora of reasons why. But no one is sitting there saying, I'm striking, so I'm not going to respond. That is not happening. And the main priority for us
listen, you've made that point. Matt, you've made the points with great passion. Thank you for coming on the line. I'm pleased we got you on the line. Well, Kelvin, it was difficult to disagree with his analysis.
Yeah, but hold on a second. I agree that there are conditions. Yeah. These are exceptional times. The NHS has turned out to be completely useless. And
well, no. We all clapped it 2 years ago. Yeah, the envy of the world.
Yeah. Well, what should we do now? If we're going to be driven by emotions in relation to the NHS, perhaps we should all boo it now at 7 o'clock. I mean, that is the reality of it. What he didn't address, and by the way, that was quite an interesting response. What he was basically saying is we don't want the money, we want conditions, right? Well, that also...
but he wasn't a union representative.
He wasn't a union and I reckon he will get an absolute bucket load for that. So thank you very much indeed, Matt, for that. But he didn't deal with the issue that this time 999 call handlers came in. He didn't deal with the issue that only if you were literally very, very ill, right, literally on death's door, was an ambulance going to turn out. Yeah. So that's a change. And they have said, both Unison and Unite, that this is the start of a long campaign. Well, how much worse is it going to get? Is it next time Category 1? Is it next time a bomb goes off in Manchester? Nobody turns out.
How political is this?
I think for the trade union leaders, this is a matter of this. They are now in a situation where they're lefties, and they may well be lefties themselves. I mean, some shockers. I mean, the guy who runs the Fire Brigades Union. Oh my God! If you looked at his background, young socialist, and then finally he gives it up.
It's back to the 70s, isn't it?
It is the 70s, and they're enjoying it. Why? Because somebody's listening to them for the first time. The amount of trade unionism in our country is obviously collapsed over years. I'm old enough to remember Harold Wilson saying to Jack Jones and Hugh Scanlon, "Get your tanks off my lawn." And that is the situation, I think, that Rishi... Look, Rishi has got a bumpy ride. I admire the fact he's brought this in. I don't admire the circumstances he should have done it when actually... there was none of this going on.
But today he pretty much got it right in your view.
He was brilliant today. He punched out Keir Starmer on a very difficult wicket.
Kelvin McKenzie, as ever. Well, guys, it's a very, very powerful, emotive debate around essential public services. But I, too, think today the Prime Minister got it right. Very often, I don't think that. In a moment, we'll analyse more deeply his performance today, not just in the House of Commons, but with the party broadcast that was put out tonight by the Conservatives. And I'll ask the question, is he really cutting the mustard with Tory voters?
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
So do you agree with me? Do you think Rishi pretty much got it right today? One viewer says, government has a duty of care to the population of the country. So, minimum service levels for health and fire service is a great idea. We are just following what many countries around the world have. Absolutely, and Sunak did make that point in the House of Commons today and made it well. Civilised countries have emergency services that work, whatever the circumstances, is my view. One more comment. Stuart says, yes, but I'm not keen on using it to cure the present problem. Can't change the rules halfway through the game. Well, actually, do you know what? I tell you something, the trade unions have been changing the rules halfway through the game, and I think the government's allowed to respond in that way. Now, let's have a quick look at tonight's party election broadcast. To begin, this is the image that Rishi Sunak was giving this evening.
I know this has been a tough winter. Our country faces some of the biggest challenges any of us will have seen in our lifetimes. With our economy, in our NHS, on our borders. 3 months ago, I was brought in to fix those challenges. Now, I want to give you a full update on our progress.
Well, that's the image, that's the style, that's the energy that he was injecting into tonight's broadcast. But let's just look at two areas. He really focused on two areas. One, this is what he had to say about the NHS.
Those difficult decisions also allowed us to give the NHS record resources. More funding, more doctors, more nurses. Every family worries about getting the NHS care they need for themselves, their parents, grandparents, or children. But COVID has done huge harm to the NHS. It's created massive backlogs, which we're working through. But Britain's heroic response to COVID shows that where the political will exists to really grip a problem, we can bring everyone together and achieve the unthinkable.
There you are. Well, there you are. The NHS is all going to be absolutely fine. And finally, he's going to stop the boats. Have a listen to this.
It's simply not right that people come here illegally. It's unfair on those who follow the rules, on those who really deserve our help. And above all, it's unfair on British taxpayers. It must stop. Under my government, it will stop. We're taking decisive action already, deploying hundreds of new agents to tackle immigration criminals, putting an end to the appalling situation where taxpayers are paying to keep illegal migrants in hotels. And we're introducing new laws that make it unambiguously clear that if you come to our country illegally, you will not have the right to stay and will be removed.
Well, we've heard that one before, haven't we? Now, joining me is Madeline Grant, sketch writer, columnist on the Daily Telegraph, and you spend a considerable amount of your working life writing about performances of leading politicians. It was interesting. There was a comment to that on Politico saying that Tory MPs were not happy with Sunak in the House of Commons today. What did you think of his approach today?
I actually think he did really well in general. I think it was actually a good move of him to be a bit more attacking and less on the defensive when it comes to issues like, for example, use of private healthcare. He finally came out and said, in the past, I have used private healthcare.
Hang on a second. He was totally Blairite. Have you used private healthcare? I've used independent healthcare.
That was it.
I mean,
That's
it's so
right.
Blairite,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes, it is a bit Blairite. But nevertheless, I mean, I think that was an improvement on the kind of hedgy defensiveness that we've had so far. And then he really took Labour to task on certain issues afterwards. It felt like a different approach and actually made quite a refreshing change from, you know, the kind of approach that we see in videos like, well, what we were just watching.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think he did pretty well in the House of Commons today, and he was really pointing at Starmer, asking Starmer direct questions which Starmer didn't answer. And
Yes.
I think, you know, I think he did win that today.
Yeah.
But then you get that party election broadcast, and there he is. He's sitting at a desk and he's all buttoned up and he's got the flags and you can almost see he's reading off the autocue. I mean, that is wooden as hell, isn't it?
It's so wooden, and it's really hard to inject any kind of organic feeling or emotion into that. Very few politicians have the gift, and it's even harder to achieve it when you're sitting behind a table in your suit, not moving very much, staring firmly at the auto cue. It's just, it's not a winner, and it's a shame because actually off the cuff, I often see the Prime Minister doing things a lot better.
Yeah, I guess after the chaos of Boris Johnson, who, and you know, you wrote at the time that he was the author of his own downfall, and I think I would probably agree with that. But after the chaos of Boris, I guess they're trying to give this look of stability. But is it, I mean, you know, you're there at the Telegraph. Is this really working with your readers?
I wouldn't say, I mean, I can't speak for all our readers. That there is, I would say there are different camps of opinion. There are quite a few people who really think that it was a mistake to get rid of Boris in the first place, that he should come back. He's the man for the job to save the day and come riding to the rescue. There's another school of thought that says that Liz Truss was right in the essentials and that she shouldn't have been jettisoned by her own party. And then there's also a lot of people who think, well, you know, Rishi Sunak might not be perfect, but it would be utterly ridiculous to get rid of him and try to install someone else. So you've got to work with what you have and try to bring the party together. I mean, there are a lot of our readers think like that.
When a party's split three ways, the prospect of bringing it together is not very great. Madeline, another issue we haven't touched about Andrew Tate on this show, and I know everybody now will have heard of who he is. Up until a few weeks ago, he was a sensation on social media for young people and young males in particular. You've written about this in the Telegraph recently. We will not go into the court case that's going on in Romania and the very serious allegations that are made against him. But he does actually make some important points, that young males are encouraged not to behave in the way that young males always have done.
I think that's the problem, because 95% of what Andrew Tate says is, I think, brash, deeply misogynistic. You know, he uses words like hoe, you know, he just spews these words out like confetti. But I think there is 5% of what he says that may be onto something. And I think the tragedy is, and the reason that people like Tate, these kind of sort of douchebaggy type men who are making a career out of being brash and rude and unpleasant and not projecting the right kind of values to young men, in my opinion, is because there are many things that we're not even vaguely allowed to talk about now. I mean, even the issue of whether there are biological sex differences between men and women, if that is taboo, then how are we to have a conversation about what role young men can have in society? And I think that there's this real gulf in discussion. And of course, when there's the gulf, opportunists and grifters and charlatans will come in to fill it.
You know, young white males are now one of the groups in society that are doing least well.
Yeah.
So there is a real issue here.
There is a real issue here. And I think if we're often told that feminism is about gender equality, I think if that is truly the case, then feminists need to have a bit more to say about this stuff, because quite frankly, anyone even mentioning these issues is often liable to be dismissed as a sort of, a misogynist or a sort of men's rights activist or something.
But the fact that Tate got such a big following, despite the fact, amongst the good stuff that he did say, there was some pretty offensive stuff.
Yeah, I'd say the lion's share of what he said was pretty bad.
So why did he build up such a big following?
Well, I mean, this is the problem. I think there's clearly a crisis in masculinity and a crisis in how young men view themselves and society views them. And I think that, I also think just not everyone who followed him will have necessarily agreed with everything. I mean, I think there was a certain amount of irreverent humour.
And shock value.
You know, he'll say things like, people ask me, why do you have a green Bugatti? I said to them, where's your Bugatti? You know, there's some of this stuff is kind of irreverent. It doesn't necessarily mean that you follow him as a kind of prophet or idol if you happen to follow him.
OK, but a lot did.
But a lot did, and also a lot of people paid $50 a month to access his weird self-help scheme.
Well, he made a lot of money somehow. Yes. Madeline Grant, thank you. Come and see us again. In a moment, I'm going to speak to some doctors, who've grouped together. They say they can cure COVID, and if a big outbreak ever happens again, save us all a fortune. Their views may be controversial, but it will be interesting.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
An organisation, global organisation called Frontline Doctors, have said that between them, they've got a success rate in dealing with people with COVID symptoms approaching 100%. They argue that if they'd been listened to, they could have saved, for example, this government about 500 billion sterling that we spent on the pandemic. Let's listen to what they have to say. They're certainly alternative views. I'm going to begin by going to South Africa and talking to Dr. Shankara Chetty. And Dr. Chetty, let me just ask you, as the first up on this, the Twitter files that have been released recently showed there was a level of censorship of debate. To what extent were you as a doctor forbidden from speaking about treatments that you thought might have been suitable? Right, that's not working. Let's try somebody else. Let's go to Dr. Robert Rapiti, who also is in South Africa, a GP in Cape Town. Robert, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mr. Farage. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Good. I was asking your colleague before about the extent of censorship that was existing. But can I ask you, Robert, what are these treatments that you were using that were different to what the WHO and the other organisations were saying we should stick with?
I think for starters, firstly, Mr. Farage, is that we didn't follow their narrative that said you do not treat early, you send people home and you wait till they get half blue in the face. We treated them immediately because that's been the norm all the time. You get them in the bud early and you treat. And the drugs we used were repurposed drugs, and I will list them for you very quickly. It's ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, which is an anti-malarial drug, repurposed, doxycycline, erythromycin, and believe it or not, a pump that's used for asthma, budesonide pump, and then we use the antihistamines, and it depended on the presentation of the case. We used prednisone, colloidal silver as to nebulize with. And then there were non-medical pharmaceutical stuffs like vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, a simple thing like saline washes in the nose and the throat, because 90% of your virus resides in the nose and throat. You wash that out twice a day. They did a study in Lucknow where they did two medical, a medical group.
Robert, I'm going to stop you there. You've given us a very comprehensive list, but I'm going to go now to Malibu in the USA and talk to Dr. Sabine Hazan. Dr. Hazan, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to ask, yes, I can. Just to ask, Robert there gave a list of drugs that were used that you guys believe to be, if they're diagnosed correctly, up to 100% effective. Why, if a big group of doctors like you have this level of conviction, why were the WHO and the FDA not prepared to listen?
Because they're not listening to doctors on the front line that have treated, and that should have been the number one thing to do, is listening to doctors that have risked their lives to go treat patients and expose themselves to patients. I'm going to show you two pictures. Oxygen saturation, 73%. 4 days later, 95%. Do you see that? Now, treatment did that. At home, no oxygen. Treatment did that. Understanding the virus, understanding that to kill a virus, you need a strong gut microbiome. That was the most important thing to understand from this pandemic. And that was not explored and that was censored. And by the way, I'm not part of the frontline MD. I just want to explain. I was actually the physician that did the clinical trials on hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, and ivermectin, doxycycline with the FDA watch. So, important fact.
Okay, fine. No, I'm going to leave. I'm going to give a final word on this, a final short word on this to Dr. Jackie Stone, British GP, currently in Zimbabwe. So, Jackie, could we have saved ourselves in this country, 500 billion sterling if we've listened to you guys?
I would have said 549 billion sterling, Nigel, because you had about 25 million. You had about 25 million cases. And if you treated them with safe repurposed medications that would have cost you about $50, say 50 quid a patient, you would have spent $1.25 billion. You have basically wasted 549 billion by spending it on unnecessary testing and spending it on hospitalizations because not a single patient should have died.
OK, look, you've made the case. I thank all of you for coming on and giving an alternative view. Thank you. Now, I know there'll be some that have listened to those testimonies and will be very, very shocked because this is not what we're supposed to talk about. We're not supposed to say this. The WHO don't approve. The British Medical Association don't approve. And I wanted to make that point very, very clear. These are alternative views, but we should debate them. In a moment, Talking Pints with senior Republican politician Mike Lee. He's a senator from Utah. I'm going to ask him what on earth was going on Capitol Hill last week.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Well, my guest tonight on Talking Pints is Senator Mike Lee from Utah, a friend of mine. Welcome to the programme, Mike.
Thank you.
Very good to see you.
Good to be with you.
Now, when you're here in London, on this side of the pond, you will overwhelmingly find people are friendly towards America, pro-America. We go to Disneyland, we go to New York in vast numbers, we watch your films, we eat American food, too much American fast food. But here's a question. Whilst there are many in America that like the UK, we got Prince Harry going on The Late Show the other evening, basically a sketch belittling the monarchy. We have writers in the New York Times, before the Queen had even been buried, writing the most disgraceful things about this country and the royal family. Is there a sort of anti-Britishness creeping into America?
No, I don't think so at all. As for Prince Harry, that's the sort of drama. It's a soap opera drama. They love to follow it just because it's drama of a high-profile family, and it makes people able to engage in a bit of frivolity as they forget their own lives for a moment. I'm not aware of any anti-British sentiment in the United States. Quite to the contrary, I think a lot of us recognize that this is where our legal system came from.
Yeah.
This was the nation from which we declared our independence. And even though we made that separation, we've always had a special bond because of our common origins.
And Utah, of course. I mean, the number of people in Utah of British descent is pretty huge, isn't it?
Yes, larger than in any other state, last time I checked. In fact, we have a non-stop flight every day between London and Salt Lake City, both ways.
And so it kind of works. Well, I hope you're right. But, I mean, Mr. Biden isn't terribly pro-British, is he?
Not exactly. Not exactly. Nor is the president to whom he served as vice president. Barack, back of the queue, Obama.
Absolutely. Now, Mike, you were, born into a political family. Your father held office with Reagan, and I guess you were always going to be, one day, somehow involved in politics. But you've now been senator representing your state since 2010. We all go into politics with a huge amount of energy, optimism and enthusiasm. Do you still have that?
I still do. I still have great optimism because the American people are basically good. The American people basically want freedom. The American people basically understand that the federal government in our country has become too big and too expensive, far too intrusive into their lives. They want something different. They want something better. And I believe at the end of the day, I am inspired by what Winston Churchill used to say of my country, when he said the American people can always be counted on to do the right thing after they've exhausted every other alternative. I don't know whether he meant that as a compliment. But
Well, it was a backhanded compliment, I think, but it was ultimately a compliment. The Republican Party. I mean, we had, last year, that building behind us was turned into a circus as we went through 4 chancellors of the Exchequer, 3 prime ministers. I mean,
so that happens here too.
Yeah, well,
circus.
But here's
we have circuses.
Here's the point. I mean, we were looking like a laughing stock. I mean, how split must this Republican Party be to have gone through that charade last week on Capitol Hill? Was it 15 rounds to elect Kevin McCarthy as...
I would not call it a charade, though.
Really?
This is not a failure. This is how things work. This is how things work when you've got members of a party who are trying to come to an agreement and have not yet arrived at an agreement. Ultimately, they arrived at an agreement after 15 votes.
After grubby deals.
Sure, grubby deals. That's the stuff that a Republican form of government is made of. Look, you don't want to elect people who will just agree with the top person on the ticket, the top person in their party every single time. If you do that, we end up with a sort of judicial oligarchy, with members just reflexively voting however the person at the top of their party...
A bit of dispute, bit of disagreement is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing, and it shows that the party is vibrant and that people within that legislative chamber have a pulse. And a lot of my friends who were involved in that effort, especially my dear friend Chip Roy from Texas, they did yeoman's work. And I sent out a tweet from my new Twitter account, @BasedMikeLee. I sent it out saying, Chip Roy equals hero. And I got a fantastic response from it.
Interesting.
Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people saw that one.
You came in 2010, you were a sort of Tea Party-ite, you were looking for reform and change. And suddenly this figure out of nowhere arrives in 2015 and walks down the escalator in Trump Tower, and the world goes, what? This isn't really happening, is it? But it did really happen. And, you know, you were cautious to begin with.
Yes, to put it mildly.
Yeah, no, and I understand that, and I get that, and you know, I was.
But I came to really like him.
Yeah, I was thoughtful as well, and I, you know, went and met him in America and thought, you know, actually, this guy's good, and he gets the big stuff right. He gets a lot of the little stuff wrong, but the big stuff right. And you've been a great supporter of him. DeSantis is a challenger, isn't he?
Yes.
I mean, he's 44. He's done amazing work in Florida.
He's 44. I hear he reads at the level of a 45-year-old, and that's impressive.
Have you any idea what's going to happen in this contest?
Not really. I mean, look, 2024, November of 2024, is political eternity away.
Yeah.
Right now, there are a lot of polling data showing Mr. DeSantis in a strong position. It's pretty difficult to know, first of all, who else might get into this race, and difficult to know exactly how the various candidates are going to position themselves. So it's a little early to predict how that'll turn out.
Now, we'll see what happens. And Trump is, I mean, a huge figure, and he is like an old heavyweight champion.
Sure.
And you know, DeSantis will have to box pretty smart to beat him.
Right.
Here's my problem with what's happening over in America. I have been involved with elections in Britain, Europe, other parts of the world. I've seen all kinds of electoral systems. You now are a country where there are tens of millions of ballots that are mailed out. People in Pennsylvania voting for the senator there in the third week of September, but not even seeing the guy on television in a debate until the last week in October. And I mean this. I think for your party to win in 2024, unless you have electoral reform, I can't see you doing it.
Yeah, I do think it's a problem. Our Constitution contemplates an election day, not an election month or season.
2 months almost.
And when we're dealing with an entire season of elections and with ballots being mailed out universally in many states, I think that presents enough opportunities for mischief that we ought to be concerned. Now, in our system of government, how those are handled is typically up to the states. But I do think we need reform in each of those states. And I think, you know, in my own view, although I'm not a state lawmaker, I tend to think that ballots ought not be mailed to someone unless there's a fairly compelling circumstance. Someone living as a shut-in who can't get out, who is immobile.
No, I agree
to send them out to everyone, it becomes nearly impossible to figure out whose ballot has gone to the right place and whose hasn't. And it seems like, in addition to the risk of actual mischief, the potential and the perception of the potential for mischief is maybe enough to reevaluate some of those laws. I can tell
you, I've seen early mail-out balloting in Britain, and I've seen it utterly corrupted.
Right.
I've seen it. I know it happens, and you've got to get that reformed.
It can be done safely, more or less. I mean, in Utah, we've experimented it for many years. I think it's done more or less in a safe manner there. But even there, I don't know that the reasons for keeping it in perpetuity.
But you're not voting on the same day with the same level of information.
Exactly. It seems like the prudential concerns as a whole would suggest that a better course of action would be to have most people go in and cast their ballots.
Yeah, I agree. Final thing to finish on, Mike, that is bigger than politics. It's about the entire shape of our communities, our lives, Western civilization. Just behind us over here is Lambeth Palace. That is the home of the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the established church. You yourself, a man of deep religious conviction from a very religious state, and you are a Mormon. We have seen a very rapid fall in the level of people in my country who identify as Christian. That trend is beginning to happen in America too. Not to the same extent, but it's beginning to happen. What's going wrong?
Well, obviously, people in your country and in mine have every right to believe as they want or to choose not to believe as they prefer. There's nothing that government can or should do about that, except perhaps insofar as government is pushing people out of churches. Anytime you see people doing that, one has to wonder about what's causing this. Well, why are people moving in this direction? What I know is that my faith is a great source of strength to me, has been to my family, has been to my country since the beginning of it. I also believe that it's difficult for any society to live in freedom, to live under a system of self-rule peacefully and with prosperity, unless they believe in something bigger, greater, and higher than themselves. And I know of no better way to do that than to stick with our beliefs and to continue to believe and follow the teachings of the Bible. That's what I will do. That's not my legislative view, because I lack the authority to legislate on that.
This is bigger than politics.
Right.
Mike Lee, thank you for joining me on Talking
Thank you.
Tides.
It's good to be with you.
Thank you. Got a few seconds left on the programme. It's time for Barrage the Farage. What have you sent me today? Do you think Rishi Sunak will go down as the worst Chancellor, the worst Prime Minister in the history of the UK? It's a bit early, Steve, for that. He's only been Prime Minister a few weeks. Premature, I would say. But one thing for certain, he is a globalist. Oh, he's cheered the Chinese up no end by re-establishing a grant for us to work more closely through the Foreign Office with China that Liz Truss had taken away. He's a globalist, not a conservative. Believe me, I'm not wrong. Time for one more. Sophie asks, do you agree with Harry's harsh opinion of the media and the press? Do you know something? He is now milking the media and the press in a way that is astonishing. He's on every American chat show that's going, and it's all about making money. You know, famous British politician Enoch Powell once said that somebody in public life complaining about the press is like a sailor complaining about rough seas. You take the rough with the smooth. Mike's done it. I've done it in public life. That's the way it is. But Harry is full of hypocrisy. When it suits him, he uses the media. Oh boy, and plenty. I'm back with you tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. I'll hand you over now to Patrick Christys.
Yes, Nigel, another absolute firecracker of a show. I don't know why anyone expects anything less these days. Right, I've got loads coming your way, including why on earth are we committing national acts of self-harm? I look at the things that Prince Harry has said to enrage the Taliban. I look at the fact that BBC has decided to try to resurrect Shamima Begum's reputation. I look at the fact that a video has re-emerged of ISIS threatening attacks in London, and I wonder, why, oh why, are we not helping ourselves by securing our borders?
Hi there, Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. It's going to be cold tonight in northern Scotland, but elsewhere across the UK, more wet and windy weather on the way. Wettest in South Wales, where of course it's been so wet so far this year. There are more weather fronts coming in, bringing bouts of rainfall that will be persistent across parts of Wales and southwest England through the night, but there'll be some wetter weather elsewhere, the rain pushing into Northern Ireland as well as Northern England, southern Scotland during the evening. Really, it's heaviest and most persistent over the Brecon Beacons, over Exmoor, and that's falling onto saturated ground. And so there'll be further issues with flooding, I think, by the morning. Accompanied by a strong wind, that wind coming from the southwest, gales in places, 12 Celsius though in the south, whilst it's clear, calmer and frosty for northern Scotland, -3 or -4 Celsius first thing. Then an area of rain moves into Scotland, northern England, Northern Ireland. As it bumps into the cold air, we can expect some snow above 400 or 500 metres for central and northern Scotland. The rain elsewhere replaced by showers. It's staying blustery through Thursday, but the gales ease and the showers will be interspersed by some brighter spells. However, it turns increasingly windy for western Scotland and Northern Ireland as we end Thursday. Gales or severe gales for the